Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the United Service Institution Strategic Dialogues, your one-stop shop for national defense and geopolitics. Today we have with us Vice Admiral AK Chawla, who has been conferred with the Param Vishist Seva Medal, the Ati Vishist Seva Medal, the Nausena Medal, and the Vishist Seva Medal. He was the Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Navy Southern Command. Over the course of his career, he has commanded 5 warships, including the aircraft carrier INS Virat and the Indian Navy's Western Fleet. He is an accomplished maritime thinker and author and has completed his PhD on the role of maritime power in China's grand strategy. Vice Admiral Chawla is an active contributor to various defense journals and is a council member of the USI, besides being involved in various social and environmental initiatives. So without much further ado, let's get into today's topic, which is India's maritime strategy. So Admiral Chawla, could you please shed some light on the evolution of India's maritime strategy since independence?
Most certainly. In fact, I would rather go back even further, because India was a very proud seafaring nation for thousands of years, and indeed we reached the apex of our maritime power somewhere around the 1st century of the Common Era under the Guptas, and if you get
The Cholas.
Emperor Ashoka. Yes, Cholas came much later, but Emperor Ashoka's expeditions to spread Buddhism to Sri Lanka, to Southeast Asia, as far afield as Japan. And then subsequently, seafaring empires of India, and you mentioned Cholas rightly, they flourished till almost the 15th century CE. But what really happened was that after the 5th century, the advent of the Mongols from Central Asia, India's attention was gradually diverted towards the continent. And finally, when the Mughals came and established the Mughal rule in India, being Central Asian people, being continental people, they really did not have much concept of maritime power. And therefore, really, when the Europeans, first led by Vasco da Gama, arrived off the coast of India in 1498, interestingly navigated by a Gujarati navigator from Africa, there was really no maritime power to oppose them. And therefore, gradually, the Europeans saw their chance. They started controlling the spice trade. They then started setting up trading posts, and as you are aware, finally led to the colonization of India. And K.M. Panikkar, who was one of our foremost maritime thinkers, had written in 1948 that India never lost her independence till she lost independence of the seas around her. So when we started off after independence, really in 1947, we were a very small brown water navy, as we call it, with a few coastal ships. Unlike the Indian Army, which the British had developed into a 2 million strong army for the Second World War and the First World War, the Indian Navy was not developed. It was a deliberate move because the British, or Great Britain at that time, controlled its overseas empire through the seas.
Yes.
And so the Royal Navy was the uncontested super navy of its time for almost 2 centuries over the seas. Until, of course, the end of the Second World War, and then the decolonization process started. So as I was saying, when we started off, we were a very small navy, but the plans that were drawn up right from the beginning, from 1948 onwards, the first five-year plan that was drawn up for the navy was very ambitious. It in fact saw the need for about 6 to 7 aircraft carriers and supporting ships for the Indian Navy. It envisaged the Indian Navy to be a sea control navy with a large fleet of sea-going ships, blue water ships as we call them. And that vision has subsequently been carried forward over successive years till to date. So essentially, if you talk about India's maritime strategy, it is of sea control. And sea control is a strategy followed by stronger naval powers, as opposed to the strategy of sea denial, which is followed by weaker powers, who then concentrate only on submarines and like forces to deny the seas to the others, whereas the sea control navy has submarines, of course, but it also has aircraft carriers and other ships to control the seas around it. So we have, in short, our strategy has been of sea control. And we have built up our force levels in that sort of mold. Though we have, to be very frank, never really achieved the kind of force levels to support a full sea control strategy as we would like. But that's been because of the economic realities. because navies are expensive. But I'm sure that as India goes ahead and becomes, one of the foremost powers in the world, we're already the fifth largest economy, shortly slated to be over the next 7-8 years, third largest economy. I think more resources would become available for us to build us up into a truly sea control.
So, a follow-up question. You mentioned sea control and sea denial. These are the different types of navies at present in the world. Could you differentiate between the two?
Yeah. So, a sea control is a concept, a maritime concept, in which you exercise control of the sea space, the undersea space, and the above sea space in a certain area. You can't control the entire globe. You require huge forces for that. But essentially, you are looking at it in a 3 and now even a 4-dimensional manner with the space above it as well into it, which then gives you the freedom to operate as you want to operate in that area, which includes not just your military forces, but maritime strategy includes non-military activities, which are a very important component, such as maritime trade, for example.
Yes, sir.
So the sea denial, on the other hand, is a resort of a weaker power, which cannot afford the entire gamut of sea control forces. So it essentially develops forces such as submarines, maybe shore-based aircraft, sea mines, and equipment and platforms like that to deny the other power certain sea space. So that is a lower cost way of doing things, but then it does not allow you to control the seas. In a sense, sea denial can be seen as a dog with a manger, sort of a policy. But it is an effective policy which can be followed by weaker maritime powers.
So, to dumb it down for a neophyte like me, would I be right in assuming that sea control means active presence in the sea, and sea denial would be where you have your weapon systems trained in a area of water?
No. Sea control would mean that really, for example, I'll give you a practical example. If you are, with that, for example, if you have the Arabian Sea to the west of coast of India, now you are using the sea for many purposes.
Yes, sir.
Principally for trade, for your energy supplies, for your data supplies underwater, for fishing, for economic exploitation, for research, for recreation. There are literally hundreds of uses of the sea. So now, if you have that sort of a desire to have an unimpeded access to the resources of the sea, then you would need forces which can control that area should a requirement happen. That means in case of wartime, you would still be able to use the seas for your vital supplies, for your oil supplies, for your all the other vital goods that keep coming into the country, for your economic activities of the seas like fishing, etc. So you will need to control the entire space.
Yes.
However, if you are a sea denial navy, then you would try to deny that space to the opposing force by using weapons such as submarines and maybe maritime patrol aircraft, etc., which can be effective in a small area, can be effective in a small area depending on the maritime geography. But it's really not designed to keep your own activities alive. He's only trying to deny it to you, but he's not able to use the seas for his own purpose. He's only trying to deny it for your purpose. So that's the difference.
So India must become a sea control power, considering its large horsemen.
Yeah, in the sense, our maritime strategies of sea control. So we need a navy which is capable of exercising sea control functions.
So, sir, when you talked about the sea control and sea denial, now what leads me to my next question would be that the capabilities of the Indian Navy, have they been defined by strategy, or has it been the other way around?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Essentially, ideally, the way a country should design its force levels and subsequently its tactics to use those 4 levels starts at the national level. So there should be a national security strategy. That national security strategy should then dictate the kind of maritime strategy that would be required to support that national security strategy. And the maritime strategy in turn would decide what kind of force levels you need to execute that maritime strategy.
But we don't have an NSS.
Right now we don't have an NSS. We have higher government directives undoubtedly, but we do have a maritime strategy. In fact, I happen to be one of the co-authors of the maritime strategy, and the maritime strategy has been written keeping in mind what we perceive India's maritime interests. Now, when you look at India's maritime interests, they can range from, as I mentioned in the previous section, our commercial interests, our offshore resources. For example, we have offshore drilling areas, our vital supplies, the sea lines of communication which keep the country going in terms of energy supplies, in terms of our exports, which supports the Indian economy to a large extent. So when we talk about our maritime interests, thereafter we decide on the maritime strategy, and then the maritime strategy goes into great depth to define what are the sea area that we would like to exercise sea control in, what are the other resources that will be required, and finally we come down to the force levels. So as you said, should it be the strategy that decides the force levels or vice versa? Ideally it should be the strategy that decides the force level. So in our case also, the force levels that we need have been drawn out from the maritime strategy that we have formulated. Today the maritime strategy is in its second iteration. It has sort of become more refined. But as I mentioned, to get the kind of forces that you need to execute the strategy that you want may not always be possible, because finally it is dictated by the requirements of, the competition between guns and butter, as it's called. So should it be spent on some other national needs which are more pressing, or should it be spent on weapon systems and like ships, submarines and aircraft? Always what happens is that the more pressing need is not for weapons, because the weapons are really felt requirements when war is upon you. Yes. Or some other crisis happens. So essentially, the sort of short answer would be that yes, our force levels have been dictated by the strategy, not vice versa. And the shortfalls that have come in, and it's not just India, every country has shortfalls, because nobody can get the kind of force level that they always need. They have been overcome by using innovations and technologies. So now technology has been a great leveler. You've seen the use of unmanned, surface vessels and unmanned aircraft in the ongoing war in Ukraine. So there are many ways technologically of overcoming the shortages that in force levels that you have, but that's not always possible. So you can mitigate some of the force level shortages or capability shortages by technology, but not both. So ideally, yes, a maritime strategy should flow from a national security strategy, which should then dictate your force levels. And if you cannot achieve those force levels, then you find bridging methods or ways to overcome,
which India has been doing.
That's right. Okay. Which we have to do.
Yes, absolutely. So you mentioned the maritime strategy which you co-authored. Could you give us a overview of that?
Yes. So the maritime strategy it's an open source document. We have put it on the web for everybody to see since 2006. Actually, since the last 18 years. And essentially, it starts off with a little bit of a maritime history in purely military terms, combat history, and not the overall maritime history of India, which would be too vast to cover in a single volume. It then goes on to outline what are our sea areas of interest, what are our immediate areas of interest, and what are our expanded areas of interest. After defining that, it goes on to the concepts of maritime domain awareness, which really is essential because getting to know what is around you is the first step in starting to take action against whatever is opposing you in that area.
Yes, sir.
Thereafter, it goes on to the broad maritime strategy concepts that we wish to follow, and the missions of the Navy that will flow from those concepts. And then it goes on to the kind of force level that we would like to have in broad terms. Obviously, in terms of, and it ends with the chapter on strategic communication, which is very important today. Obviously, you cannot outline because of security reasons exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to do. But this provides a broad outline to both friends and enemies alike that this is our intent, this is what we want to do. And being a democratic and open society, we are not shy about sharing our priorities and our requirements from the sea, which obviously is not against anybody else's interest. It is purely in their interest. So that's the broad outline of the maritime strategy that we have.
Understood, sir. So, sir, my next question would be: what are the key challenges, security challenges in the Indian Ocean region, and how does the Navy choose to address them?
We have a variety of maritime security challenges. Immediately, if you see, I'm sure the people watching this program would be aware of the problems that have been caused in the Red Sea and the Gulf region by the pirates.
Houthis.
First for the pirates, they've been sort of pirating ships since 2008. That has been ongoing. And lately we have had these attacks on ships by the Houthis, which are in response to the, as per them, in response to the Israel-Palestine conflict that is ongoing in Gaza. So these are two of the immediate threats that you can see are manifesting. However, there are a variety of other threats. We have adversary states who are opposed to our national interests, who covet our territory, who are opposed to our democracy and our open way of life, who threaten maritime security in a number of ways. You might remember the 26/11 attack just happened off Mumbai, and the number of people that died, and the attackers came by sea. We have a huge amount of drug smuggling going on. We have the Golden Crescent to the west of us, that is the Afghanistan, Pakistan area. We have the Golden Triangle to the east of us, that is the Myanmar, Laos triangle, from where a lot of drugs are manufactured and smuggled, and largely across the sea, because it's on the seas that you can transport huge quantities of drugs, thousands and thousands of crores worth of drugs. You have arms smuggling happening there to support terrorist movements or insurgent movements across the region. You also have today, on a much wider scale, the threat of climate change, which is principally affecting the oceans. The climate change is driven by the ocean, which is going to have or already having impacts such as rise in sea levels, much more violent storms, very, very intense bursts of rainfall, all because of climate change related to the oceans. So therefore, there are a range of issues that we have to deal with as far as maritime threats are concerned, and these threats have been classified in between conventional and non-conventional. So conventional threats would largely be the military threats that we face, and non-conventional ones are the ones that are, I've enumerated many of them, starting from piracy to drug trafficking to arms smuggling to climate change and a myriad other things that are affecting the security of the seas today. So these threats are the ones that we have to address today, and the maritime strategy indeed looks at each of these threats and sort of gives a response strategy to each threat, and out of that response strategy, as I said, comes out of force level. What happens is that this is not constant. There are some maritime threats that are constant, but many of them mutate over time. Technology is now causing new threats down.
Yes, sir.
For example, unmanned vessels are a new threat if in the hands of malign actors. 99% of the data that is used by all of us, we are all addicted to the internet, comes by cables underneath the sea. Only less than 1% comes in via the satellites. So, and recently we've had instances of data cables, underwater data cables being damaged. So these are threats that come in. However, along with the threats, we must remember that we have maritime interests. So the strategy also looks at maritime interests. In fact, that is the first part of it, that what are our maritime interests? And I outlined some of them to you earlier. For example, we have, if you go into specifics, we have the exclusive economic zone of India, that is 200 nautical miles from our coast. Shortly going to go up to 350 miles, which is, if you really look at it and tabulate it, comes to almost the landmarks of India. We have island territories of both coasts, the Lakshadweep Islands, as also the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. which are very valuable resources for the country. We have trade routes that need to get open. We have ports and harbors that need to be protected from malign actors using them for wrong purposes. We have literally close to 300,000 fishing boats and a huge fishing community, which then supports the nutritional requirements of the country, a large part of the country. We also have critical infrastructure along the coast, such as nuclear power plants, petrochemical plants, which needs to be protected. So all these are, maritime interests, which are looked at along with the maritime threats. So the maritime strategies for it.
So, sir, as a maritime thinker, I would like to hear your recommendations on how to improve India's naval power and footprint.
The very short point that I would like to make first is that no country has ever become a great power without first being a maritime power. And this is evident throughout the history of human civilization. Now, India has all the attributes of a potential great power. We were a great power close to 2,000 years ago, and we have the attributes today to become a great power once again. However, the maritime power remains a weak link in our comprehensive national power. And the reason for that is obvious, that we have been besieged from the continental side by threats since our independence, and so much of our focus and attention after independence and in the preceding 1,000 years has been focused towards land, it's not towards the sea. Now, this mentality has to change. A lot of people are realizing in India that this mentality has to change, because finally our prosperity and our destiny lies over the seas. Therefore, what we need to do is to strengthen our maritime power. Now, maritime power is a very wide concept, unlike land and air concepts, where the military is a distinct component of land power or air power. At sea, the maritime power encompasses both military and non-military aspects of a country. So, for example, the merchant marine. The merchant marine is a very important attribute of maritime power, because the merchant marine, which carries the Indian flag, is a resource that can be used both in peace and war.
Yes, sir.
Similarly, if you have a capable fishing industry, it has many other uses apart from purely fishing. Essentially, maritime power, if we look at shipbuilding as another aspect, a shipbuilding country will build both merchant ships and good warships. So what we really need to do is to strengthen our comprehensive maritime power, and we need to ensure that all components of the maritime power, whether it is just not only the Navy, the Coast Guard, the Marine Police, the Marine Customs which are there, our scientific research community in the maritime area, vessels that operate for research in the maritime dimension, underwater capabilities in the maritime dimension, our fishing fleet, and everything else connected with it. For example, our scientific and technological capability to mine resources from under the sea. All these needs to be comprehensively strengthened. Now, if you do that, then you will find that it strengthens the country's economy, which in turn obviously will drive the development of its military. So therefore, I think the short recommendation is that we need to start looking at the seas much more closely and paying much more attention to them, because as we grow in national power, ultimately our destiny lies across the seas, and the stronger we are at sea, the safer we will be on land.
So, with that in mind, I'll bring this session to an end. Vice Admiral Chawla, thank you so much for enlightening us about India's maritime strategy.
You're most welcome.